All righty. So, so election season discipline. I thought this would just be a good topic as we're starting to enter in to all the election craziness that's heading our way. But as volunteers for Convention of States, we're engaged in long-term constitutional reform. So our effectiveness in Colorado depends not only on our passion, but on our professionalism, discipline, and our strategic awareness. So I've learned that Colorado operates under a compliant-driven campaign finance system. And that's just a fancy way of saying that any individual may file a complaint, and even technical missteps can trigger reviews from the Secretary of State's office. So, more importantly, our long-term credibility with legislators depend upon how we conduct ourselves during the election season. So our objective, right, is to protect the mission, protect the organization, and expand our long-term influence with legislators. So when you speak as a convention of states person, right, your communication must remain issue focused and nonpartisan. Okay. So when you speak as a private citizen, though, you are free to engage politically as you see fit. Okay. But we cannot use Convention of States resources. We can't use branding. We can't use Convention of States communication platforms or titles. Okay. That's really important for us to understand because we have to have a clear separation that will protect both us and the organization as well. So when we talk about titles on my social platforms, um, I don't indicate anywhere on my social media that I'm the state director for Convention of States Colorado. Um, but what I do is I have in my I guess it's my profile. I've got my link that takes people to educate themselves at Convention of States and also provide them the opportunity to sign the petition. Okay, that's perfectly fine to do, but don't brand your social media with Convention of States and then start using your own thoughts. Okay, we need to keep those two things completely separate, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. So I kind of look at this stuff. I went back and reviewed the legal video, and I tell you, every time I watch that, I have more questions. So I decided to kind of talk about it in this manner. We have basically zones. There's three of them that we kind of operate in to be successful. We have the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone. So the green zone's a simple one. This is just how my simple mind works. So you guys got to kind of bear with me. But the green zone is always appropriate. Okay. And basically, we're just following activities that encourage Convention of States branding, right? We talk about educating others about Convention of States, explaining how Article 5 works structurally, discussing the faithful commissioners legislation, hosting nonpartisan civic education events, focusing on constitutional reform and encouraging, civic participation. That's all legal for us to do all the time. Okay. All communication should remain factual, respectful, and focused on Constitution process rather than candidates or campaigns. So that's our strength, right? Credibility, not partisanship. So I'd kind of like to open up that green zone to everybody. Some of your comments, thoughts, questions. I'd kind of like your thoughts on how the educational conversations about Article 5 help us build support across different political perspectives, because we're trying to reach unaffiliated folks as well as moderate Democrats in this conversation. So what are some of your all's thoughts on this?
So
And
Frank,
I can't see hands right now. So
Frank,
just
yeah,
unmute and spit it out.
yeah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, yeah, so, when we talk about process, legislative process, like at the Capitol, looking at, like, for example, I try to understand the legislative procedures that the Senate goes through, that the House goes through. What are some of their rules? Like, for example, we've learned a hard lesson, I think, last year that December 1st is a pretty hard deadline for legislators to get their first 3 of 5 bills in. And that's before they even start session. I mean, there was some good lessons learned on that. And understanding that process that they go through is part of what we do to engage with legislators. That is a very neutral ground to be on when speaking to legislators. And we're talking what they have to go through by saying those things and understanding their process as a way we really show credibility. And when we're trying to introduce ideas like the 34 ready legislation. And I have found that the more I understand that process, the better I'm going to be when I try to talk to them. And, I found it to be very valuable. I'm learning a lot more every year about how the legislative process in the Capitol works. And I still don't have it all down. There's always something new I'm learning. And I found that that's safe ground to be on. So that's my one example, I think, that falls into that green zone that you're talking about. I believe that's what
Yes.
you're getting at.
Yeah, yeah. So understanding the process, right? That's our bread and butter. That's how we're going to be successful. So anybody else have any thoughts on this? And again, I can't see hands, so
Oh,
just
I'm
shout
gonna
out.
just jump in. This is Ken. I maybe I misunderstood what you're saying, but when it comes to discussing things with politicians, I basically stick by the rule to be in the green, as you say, is you do not discuss a particular politician, a
Yeah.
particular party, or their policy. That's the three P's. If you stay away from those three P's, you should be in the green zone all the time. Again, that's a particular politician, a particular party, or a particular policy. You should be fine.
That's a great way to look at it because that segues into the yellow zone, right? The is there anybody else have any comments on this? I don't want to rush through this. I,
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to turn this into more of a
yeah, I
conversation.
sometimes think that when we get into a really good discussion with someone, and let's say they buy into the Article 5 convention process. They say, I understand that. That's good. Thank you. I understand the platform. That's good. And they generally understand the process. Then when you get to specific potential amendments, that I find that this is where maybe people might get a little touchy, but I still try to provide a neutral, nonpartisan basis for that discussion. So if you talk about, say, a balanced budget amendment, I like to say, well, here are some historical facts about how this came about. I can say 9 different times Congress has tried to pass the balanced budget amendment beginning back in 1981, 82 Congress, with the last attempt being the 2017, 2018 Congress. And, the best attempt was in 1995, 95 Congress. When you start saying those factual things, there is nothing about that is, I think, political. It's historical. When I say this is how close it was, and these are some of the things that have happened before, well, a convention of states could probably get that done where Congress couldn't. I mean, there were a couple of close calls there where it did pass, but they just couldn't get the job done. So a convention of states is probably the place for it to happen. So it's an interest in this country. It's been done. And so the historical context, I think, is a great way to provide, a discussion point on a specific amendment topic without it being emotional. And so,
Yes.
because that's sort of the next step after you talked about the general process, and then you start going down what are potential specific amendments, and then you got term limits, another one, federal budget timelines, another one of them I like, or a partial modification to the 17th Amendment. What would that look like? I mean, I could talk through all kinds of amendment examples, but I like to do it with factual historical context. And I find that that is the best way to do that.
Yep. So as we're educating, that's all in the green. We can educate, but be factual, right? Be professional. And we don't need to really do it with passion. Um, we've got the Constitution on our side with
I
this.
think you can be passionate about it, but you just need to be factual with it at the same time. And I think
Yeah,
that's okay. Like after I said the facts and everything, I can say, I think this will help reestablish trust in our government. That's kind of like, why do we need a convention? Because I've said how there's a low level of trust in the federal government ranging 20-25% since about 2008. So when I set the stage, I said, the hope is that the increase in the level of trust in the government will come as a result of these events, and so that's the passionate part about it. And that's hopefully what appeals to somebody on that. Without it being attacking a particular group, it's not. I mean, it's federal government as a whole. I'm not singling out any one group at all. So I think those are ways you can get into a passion discussion with someone of why this is important, but it can still be fairly objective in a way that people can see, yeah, that's a problem. We need to
yeah,
fix that.
yeah, that makes sense. So as we're representing convention of states, right? When we start talking about getting into the yellow zone, um, Ken's absolutely right. These activities require a little additional care, especially within 60 days of a general election or 30 days from a primary. Okay. So naming specific candidates and communication, um, we've got to be careful there. Uh, Critiquing a candidate's vote, comparing candidates' positions, your communication, if it mentions a candidate and it's close to an election and you're representing COS, that's the key. If you're representing COS, you need to take pause and consult leadership before distributing that content under COS branding. So remember, Colorado's enforcement system is compliant driven, and we want to make sure that timing and perception matters in these types of things. So take caution in the yellow zone. Um, so so in a compliant driven state like Colorado, why do you think perception can sometimes matter as much as intent in this kind of subject? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Everybody kind of understands that concept pretty good. Okay, so we won't
Just 1 second before we leave that.
absolutely.
I worked for years regulating pesticides in California. And we had a phrase that we used almost daily. The perception is the reality that you have to deal with. Whatever the truth is, it's a perception of whatever that is that you have to deal with. And I found that to be true. So perception is important.
Because stuff can really be taken out of context. Is that what you're kind of driving at? And they
Yeah,
can interpret the message differently.
when you're dealing with an issue that the public is contentious with or that's interested in, let's just say, and keep it sterile. What they believe is the first thing that you have to consider. That's their perception of it. That may be accurate of the truth. It may be way off. And when people get a general perception that becomes predominant about a certain issue, and we go back to pesticides, there was some strong issues on pesticides, particularly in California, and so we were constantly having to address and people's views on pesticides, whether you're trying to poison the environment or we can't grow food without it or whatever. And there was usually a range, and you had to know kind of your audience and where you were coming from. Of course, we had to stay in the middle as the officials, but yeah, you just you had to recognize the perception, prominent perception of the group you were in. If we were in with a bunch of farm advisors, the perceptions we were trying to deal with were real different if we were talking to a bunch of tree huggers. So that's all I was saying. I think perception is something that you've got to be aware of, and you've got to be sensitive to your audience. And it's really fun when you got a 50-50 audience and trying to deal with the perception.
Interesting. Yep. So remember the takeaway here is this only exists if you're representing convention of states. Okay, this yellow zone is just representing convention of states. So as we move on to the red zone that I look at, this is private citizen activity only. Okay, this is where the fun part is. Okay, where our grassroots activism kicks in. You may personally engage in partisan political activity, but not as a representative of convention of states. Okay. So examples like that of that include like endorsing candidates, campaign volunteering. Um, if you send a personal email out as a private citizen and you post vote for this individual, not this individual, or defeat this or defeat that, perfectly fine. Okay. Even though you're a supporter of Convention of States, you're not representing Convention of States. You're a private citizen. So these grassroots activism items are amazingly important for us. Uh, Donating to campaigns, attending partisan rallies, right? These are all things that you can do as a private citizen. Okay. That's where you need to be careful of that perception, where you don't want to cross that line. Okay. If your social media, right? If you've got a lot of COS branding on there, that's a no-go, right? You want to be neutral as a private citizen on your social media, and you can have at it. National takes our social media branding very seriously, for good reason. Okay, so as a private citizen, you can do all of these wonderful things. So when engaged in partisan political activity, just do not use COS branding, COS materials, um, the Citizen Builder platform, visual identifiers, that in a way could reasonably imply organizational endorsements. We got to be very careful with that. Okay. And then just maintain clear boundaries. Okay. Protect your credibility and the organization's reputation. So that's really what I'm kind of asking for there. Um, so as I thought about this, why do you think it's important for people to clearly distinguish between their personal political activities, and their role as a COS volunteer? You know, where what do y'all kind of think about that?
You're looking at risking the 501c3 or 501c4. I mean,
Yeah,
the COS has, and that would be a nationwide repeal on our part, and you'd be screwing up for the whole nation.
yeah, yeah. That's huge. So so really, those two designations just they're IRS rules that determine what an organization can and cannot do. Okay. Um, uh, our national organization takes that very seriously, um, because, you know, there are folks, that would want to shut down, just like you say, convention of states. So that's why they want to kind of drive this point home with folks. They want you to be grassroots activists, but they want you to do it as a private citizen. Don't blur those lines, because sometimes we get very passionate about convention of states and we love to wear the gear and all that kind of stuff, but always just consider what that looks like. Okay. And anybody else got any kind of thoughts on that?
Well, I know,
Frank, I
Yeah.
have a thought. I'm sorry, my camera's not functioning. I had to use the browser because the app was it might fire up any second now. It wouldn't fire up and then it fired up 3 or 4 times while I had the browser on. Anyway,
That's okay. You're looking sharp, man. Go ahead.
yeah, thank you. Uh the in my signature of my email, it has COS on it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, when I contact my um, representatives, that's down there. I mean, I don't, you know what I mean? I'm going to write Brittany Peterson and congratulate her on voting no to send the congressional sexual harassment thing into committee to kill it. She actually voted no, which surprised me.
Yeah.
And so I was going to, write her and say, hey, I noticed that your vote on this issue and I'm behind you on that. And so I thought, well, maybe I should just get rid of that signature.
What's the signature block say?
It says Convention of States, District Captain, HD 28, blah, 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 the rest of it.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I do. Okay. I have two signature blocks. So when I'm representing Convention of States, I use my Convention of States, Frank Vaughn, State Director, Colorado. When I'm engaging with a representative as Frank a constituent or Frank as a citizen, it's got my business signature block on it. So that's kind of how I distinguish between the two. Does that kind of make sense?
It does.
Yeah. Anybody else got any thoughts on that?
Frank, I don't know if this is along the same lines of what you're talking about, but I'm thinking about
Love you, son.
potential engagements we've had with other organizations. I'm thinking about AMAC that I presented back in January, El Paso County GOP. I'm meeting up with Neil Schur tomorrow, who's the Path to Reform, sorry, who's the president here. I'm meeting with him tomorrow, Gemini. These other organizational engagements that have some of the same values we do. I've tried to be careful about their views on some things. Like for the AMAC presentation, I had a rehearsal before the main presentation that following week, and one of the leaders had some negative comments to say about Convention of States action, and so I just let them talk. I did not agree or disagree. I just let them talk, and I wasn't going to try and change their opinion because they already invited me to their statewide meeting, so I had no reason to worry about that. But you see, I can see where when we present ourselves to other organizations, and especially if we're maybe starting to partner with them, because I'm wondering how it's going to work tomorrow with Neil. If he and I are going to talk about 34 Ready, he's giving me some things to read, and I'm going to use that in our discussion tomorrow. And I'm going to pick his brains about Mark Schneider, who's the House or Senate District 12 Democrat. He's recommended that maybe I see. I want to pick his brains on that. But you see, these partnerships, I think, are going to be something new, at least for me this year. And how we conduct ourselves with these other organizations is also something, I'm like, okay, let me just be careful about what they say. When I'm wearing the, Convention of States hat that I have, and just represent the organization, but don't say they're wrong, or if they have an opinion, just let them say their opinion. But I don't need to worry about trying to disagree or argue with them about maybe something that may not need to be done, because I'm already there working with them. And so I think there's going to be some of that. I mean, I think that there's other potential partnerships we can have here in this state. And I'm wondering where that's going to go. I'm treading in new territory here. It's interesting to see where that goes. So, am I in the green zone on that? Am I in the yellow zone? I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean,
So,
I'm gonna
so
you
here's
say,
kind of how I would kind of look at that, and then we'll see if anybody else sees it differently, but or if they got any other thoughts. But as long as you're educating, right, you're having a conversation with a like-minded organization on education on Article 5, right? The Faithful Commissioner Bill. We're just having a conversation about that. Now, if you're trying to influence, right, a legislator, or in a campaign way, right? You see the distinction there? We as grassroots activists can lobby, right? Um, Active members of Congress, right?
right,
But we need to be very careful in the candidate sphere, right? So you're clearly operating in that green zone where we're educating, okay?
yeah,
And we
sure,
can we can educate candidates, right? Uh,
yeah,
but
that's true, right,
but we can't go, hey, if you don't support convention of states, I know a lot of people and we're not going to vote for you. That's clearly, right? The pendulum
right,
has swung
yeah.
there. So
Now, one thing that I still like doing is showing our petition charts that we have by district and sharing that with people. It's like, here it is. This is the breakdown, and just showing where are the facts on this petition, but not necessarily using it to endorse a candidate. But a candidate can take that and say, I like this. Can I
yeah,
take this with me? Yes, you may. And they
yeah,
can use that if they want for
but
their candidacy, but we're
yeah,
not pushing it. They're taking it from us and they're just using that as a fact. And I think that's okay to do that.
yeah, you're educating, right? And
Right,
it's in a
exactly.
factual basis, right? Anybody else
Exactly.
got any thoughts on that?
I would just say is they can endorse us all they want. We just can't endorse them.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you brought that up, Vivian. Hey, did everybody catch that? They can endorse us. We can't endorse them, right? So that's very important, especially as we start to get into pulling campaign surveys and some of that kind of stuff. So, anybody else got anything about the red zone they want to talk about?
I think in the red zone, there are some things that as a private citizen, I feel pretty strongly about when it comes to an Article 5 convention. Like, for example, um, I'm a big advocate for state ratifying conventions. I'm a big advocate for that. Came this close to getting an official endorsement from Mark Meckler last year. Very, very close. And I wish I wish they would do that. I really wish they would do. And I'm not upset where we are on that right now, but you know, I want that to happen. I want Mark Meckler to officially endorse something. I would really like to see that because I use that in my conversations, even when I'm probably wearing the COSA hat. But I think I am safe to do that. And I think it's okay for me to say that because it's a part of Article 5. It is a part of Article 5. I mean, doggone it. And so, I really, really am passionate about that as a private citizen. But I think it's okay to use that when I'm wearing the COSA hat. I haven't had challenges with it. I haven't had issues with it because I'm going to continue to push it.
Yeah.
I am going to continue to push it because I got historical bases, I got facts that I can use to back that up, and it's a part of my Article 5 discussion. But I don't see a whole lot of people in COSA doing that. So, I'm going to continue to probably do that.
But you're educating, right?
Right.
And
As a private citizen, though, that's where it started. I'm still very passionate about
but that's clearly in the green zone.
it. Okay.
You know,
All right. Well, it started as a private citizen is where I'm saying. So, I
yeah,
mean,
because
I have a
when
question for you, Frank.
yes, sir.
Okay, I don't know what it's like in other counties, but in this county here, we generally have several people running for the same office come to a little get together, a few places in town. Now, when I go there, I'm obviously going to ask, do you support having an Article 5 convention of the states to, you know, put in term limits and hit the three? Now, if I do that, is it okay to be wearing all the COS equipment, shall we say, hat and whatnot? Because there's going to be it's kind of an iffy thing.
So
I'm asking a
bring
question as a citizen, but I'm pushing a subject. I want to know which one of them on that stage here is going to support COS. I'm not going to say if you don't support it, I'm not going to vote for you. I'm going to say I just want to see which one of you do.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point, because perception, right? And perception's reality. Okay. Um, if you're at a rally, right? And you're taking a picture with the candidate, right? And you've got, your COS shirt, your hat, all that kind of stuff, and you're shaking that individual's hand, right? Um, Perception in this particular conversation, does does that imply COS supports that candidate, or is it you as a private citizen?
I'm talking more along a town hall, but I see what you're
Well,
saying there.
I saw Jim laughing, so I'm dying to know what he thinks about this.
You want my comments on that?
Mhm.
Absolutely, that.
I, I, I think there's a fine line where you're wearing the COS regalia and you're befriending a candidate, putting your arm around him, and the perception is that you are endorsing him and vice versa. Um, I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's in the red zone at all. It might be in the yellow zone a bit, but you have to be careful about what you would say. Candidate Smith is obviously in support of Convention of States, would be inappropriate. If the candidate wants to say that, that's fine, but you can't imply that he endorses you verbally, for sure.
Yep.
Um,
And that, no, go ahead. Who's next?
Matt, yeah, I want to jump in here. What this all gets down to for me is what can I say to our COS, our registered COS supporters in Citizen Builder regarding the candidates who are running for legislature? We are going to, I presume, send out our survey and ask them to fill it out. And we have their responses on record. Are we permitted to share those responses with the people in those House districts where the candidates, they filled out the survey, we have it on record? Are we permitted to merely be a conduit, share that with our petition signers in each of the House districts that we have in Citizen Builder?
So if we get our way, the answer is yes on that. Okay. Um, but we also have to jump through some hoops with national. Okay. National says that we can right now share that information with folks who have signed our volunteer activist uh, documentation. Okay. Who are currently grassroots volunteers. We can share that information with them in that House district. Okay. But
Why not just petition signers? I don't mean to get into debate right now,
yeah,
but you know what I'm driving at.
yeah,
Either
yeah.
we have some bite to our grassroots activity, or forget it. I'm going to go off and be a private citizen, period.
Right. So the bite is as a private citizen. That's what this whole conversation is about, letting you guys know you need to be grassroots activists. Okay. You support Convention of States, but you go to those town hall meetings, you go to those candidate forums, you engage those candidates, right? But you engage them as a private citizen. Okay.
I understand.
A- and then we'll continue to push the envelope of education to the House districts. That you guys have my commitment on because that's really what we need to do here in the state of Colorado. I don't want to turn this into a philosophical conversation about how we'll be successful eventually in Colorado, but I am passionate as a private citizen that we need a governor that can veto legislation right now. That's the fastest way for us to kind of get a check and balance on the stuff coming out of the Golden Dome. But yeah, we need to be cognizant of those realities and make sure that we're operating within, nationals requirements of us. So did that scratch your itch, John?
Um, well, yes, in that you recognize that we absolutely want to be able to share with any and all of our supporters in Citizen Builder by House District with any information we have about whether the candidate or the incumbent supports COS. And if they've completed the survey, they completed the survey. It's their information. I'm simply relaying it, I'm communicating it. If we're able to do that, I don't have an issue. Okay. I'm still going to go out and be a citizen activist in, a half dozen of those districts. And by the way, it's not a philosophical discussion. The game in this state is to flip House seats, period. We have no chance of passing a resolution or probably that 34 already without flipping House seats. Okay. I'm being a realist, practical. So I'm fine. But as you said in our exchange of emails earlier today, you and I need to get on the phone and talk through this C4 and C3 stuff
Yep,
because I thought I had that down cold. Okay.
I
So
know.
Thursday or Friday will work, and we can talk about this larger issue about going and
Yep.
talking national.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why it's complicated between the entities, right? C3, C4, what are the differences? They can get very complex very quickly, right? So that's why national takes an approach of caution, okay, in a C4. C4s can do quite a bit of things, right? That a C3 cannot do, but
Right.
national restricts us from doing that so that we don't get in trouble. Okay. So we do have to work within those boundaries, but I think we'll be very successful in 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 Colorado by by working together. So you and I'll chat
Okay.
more about this.
Sure.
The
Yes.
because it all kind of
Thursday or Friday. Okay.
okay, sounds good. But it all kind of boils down to why discipline matters, right? Because, it's not about limiting your voice, right? It's about strengthening our long-term impact in Colorado. Okay. And John, you're spot on. We've got to get some balance in what's going on in Colorado's politics to be successful where we're at. But we also need independents and we also need some moderate Democrats to get it done too. So there's balance there. Our success is going to depend on building trusted relationships, under the Golden Dome, right? Engaging moderates respectfully, positioning 34 Ready as a good governance solution, maintaining credibility, right, across party lines. Um, uh, and so we want to be careful, right? So one careless or one partisan communication coming from convention of states, right, can undermine months of relationship building, right? But if it's coming from private citizen, you've got the green light, right? You can do anything that you want to engage a candidate or a representative. But just be mindful that if you're doing it under the umbrella of COS, that we follow the rules accordingly. Um, the We're really just playing the long game here, and the more that I've engaged in this position, the more I've learned. And the more we learn, the more successful we're going to be at this thing. Um, so, with the why that we're talking about, how do y'all think, the discipline during the election season can actually expand our influence, right, on some of these folks? Can we get some candidates that are moderate as Republicans or moderate as Democrats? Um, can we get them to have a conversation with us? What are your all's thoughts on that? Because like for example, if you go to a candidate forum and you engage with that candidate and you start talking about convention of states, um, you know, can can you have an impact if that person actually gets elected? What are your all thoughts about that?
Frank, one of the thoughts I have right now with this election season coming up is that I think the legislators or candidates that are running for election, their focus is on getting elected.
Yeah.
And they're going to be so busy doing that. I'm having trouble understanding if we'll even get on their calendar this summer to even talk about 34A. So here's where I'm going with this. So Jim and I are going to talk with Neil Sure tomorrow. And I really want to pick Neil's brain about why he recommended that I talk to Senator Mark Snyder, who's Democrat for Senate District 12. Mark Snyder is not running for re-election. He's got 2 years on his current term, so he's not up for election. So he has no campaign he needs to worry about this summer, which I think means he's more open. His schedule should be more open for maybe engagement on what legislation he wants to have for the next session in 2027. He's on the Opportunity Caucus, so he's potentially that moderate Democrat line that we've been talking about with Opportunity Caucus. I would like to see if maybe he's going to be worth engaging because he's in Manitou Springs, so he's in my backyard. He's just south of here. And so I want to see if maybe we pay him a visit at the Capitol maybe next month just to say hi and say he'd like to sit down with you during the off season to really go through this, plant the seed. Because I think we're going to, if we're talking 34 ready, I think we probably need to hit people in the Senate that are probably not running for reelection. And then if you're looking at the House, target those that are an obvious reelection success, like Jarvis Caldwell will probably win House District 20. That's a very heavy Republican district. But you see, if you're trying to get a candidate's attention that's in one of those borderline races, I don't know if we'll be able to get much of their time. So it's a very targeted approach, a very deliberate targeted approach of who we try to talk to about the legislation. Now, if it's just general education, that's probably okay. But I'm looking at this pretty hard. So I'm going to see what we get in our meeting with Neil tomorrow. I want to ask him if he's strongly recommending Mark Schneider. I want to ask him, well, can you drop a word for him for me that I'm looking to try and meet him? Maybe he's got the inside track with Mark Schneider. I don't know. I mean, maybe he has some relationship with him. I don't fully understand, but I'd like to leverage that. It's like leveraging a partnership with Path to Reform on this one and seeing where that goes. So, yeah, that's sort of my thinking on this, on how we're going to try and do it in the off season, because December 1st is right around the corner. And if you got candidates worried about their primary and their general election in November, I don't know if legislation is going to be the first thing we can really get in their inbox right away. So that's just my opinion so far on the election season.
Well, I tell you, I'll leave you with, well, I tell you what, we got 10 more minutes before the top of the hour. Before we go on to the call to action, I'd like to kind of open it up to conversation on what we've talked about so far. If anybody's got some reattack that they want to have a discussion about. Anybody out there that
Yeah,
wants to do that?
I,
Okay.
I would like to follow up with what Michael was saying. I spent Monday hunting with Paul Lundeen, and Paul and I talked extensively about Convention of States and about the potential players in the Senate and in the House. Um, the Opportunity Caucus is where he feels that we have our best interest. And if we can get Mark Schneider and we can get Mark Baisley together to co-sponsor 34 Ready, that would be an ideal situation. Got a Democrat, got a Republican, and if we can get those guys together to sponsor 34 Ready, I think we have a good chance of getting it to the governor's desk. And whether the governor at that time will sign it, I don't know. But if it's Victor Mark, would probably get it signed. But let's figure out who the governor is going to be. But that's going to be in the next session. So anyway, that's my input. Paul is extremely well knowledgeable about the entire assembly of senators and representatives. It's good spending time with him.
It's about relationship building, right?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So I tell you what, so as we close tonight, I want to just leave you with one simple action step. Every one of us lives in a state house district. And every district has a representative or someone that's going to run as a candidate and wants to become a representative, right? Those individuals are people who ultimately decide whether Convention of States is going to move forward in Colorado or not. So one of the most important things grassroots activists, grassroots citizens can do is simply engage them as informed constituents, right? It can be as simple as attending their town hall. They're all going to have some type of a candidate forum, right? Introduce yourself at a community event. Invite them for coffee, right? Ask thoughtful questions about Article 5 and the role that the states play in it. Okay. You don't have to debate them, right? You don't have to convince them in one conversation to support or not. Our goal is much simpler right now. Build relationships, just like Jim was just talking about. Ask good questions. Help candidates or elected officials understand that thoughtful citizens in their districts care about the constitutional role the state plays. Okay. Education is what this thing's all about. So, and the interesting thing is that when legislators see informed, respectful constituents showing up consistently, it changes how they think about issues. So as we all leave tonight, I would encourage you to do just one thing. Identify the candidate and representative in your House district, okay? In each one of your House district, just identify who's running and who the current representative is, and find one opportunity, just one opportunity to introduce yourself and start the conversation, okay? Whether it's at their candidate event, caucuses just finished up, Republican and Democrat. Those are great opportunities to interject. We've got the assemblies, county assemblies coming up here in a week or two. Those are great opportunities. Candidates show up at those events to speak, and you could actually have an engagement with them at that time. So that's how citizen movement or movement and momentum grows. One relationship, one conversation, one district at a time, and that's what's going to help us, push this rock up the hill. So we've got a couple of minutes left over. If anybody's got some reattacks or has something burning that they need to get off their chest. I'm not hearing of anybody.
I'll be sure to write you a summary of our meeting tomorrow with Neil, when Jim and I
Yeah,
go see him tomorrow. So looking forward to that and see what that can bring for us.
Hey,
yeah.
Frank, I
Yes,
don't
yes, sir.
know whether if Tim Snyder's been filling you in, but tomorrow I'm taking our new volunteer activist, Lisa Arweiler, down for a visit to the Capitol. Okay.
Awesome.
And lo and behold, oh my God, she got 5 minutes with her House District Representative, Tammy Story. So I'm going to, show her the ropes, put her through the paces tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely beautiful.
Good stuff.
Yeah, Mike Doohan, when they canceled um, the committee hearing, what we did was we shifted gears and started knocking on doors of Opportunity Caucus members.
Right.
And we were able to have a good conversation with Representative Lucan's aide and the
Sheila Lukens, right?
yeah, and that young man knew an awful lot about convention of states. We had a very engaging conversation about it, and so there was another one too. I can't off the top of my head. I can't think of her name, but
Right.
we had a good conversation with her aide as well. So so even if you can't talk to the representative, those aides are more influential than people
Right,
realize.
right. Exactly,
So
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anybody on this event that wants to go down to the Capitol, just reach out to us. Um, that's why I wanted Mike to kind of talk about his experience because we spent about 2.5, almost 3 hours down there, and I ran into Senator Baisley. He asked me to get a hold of his aide, and he gave me the number and to have a sit down meeting with him. So it's constant and consistent engagement with these folks
Right.
is
Yep.
is how we're going to make this thing happen.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that I said to Lisa, this was just today, that I gave you an itinerary and we're going to follow it unless I run into somebody. And we need and I just explained to her this whole thing could go right into the wastebasket, and you and I are going to end up talking to a whole different group of people down there. It's just you have to be opportunistic, and you don't learn to do it until you go down there and do it. So
Yep.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Well, on that note, I ran into uh, who was it? Scott. Um,
Slaw
no,
or
Scott
Bright?
Bright, Scott Bright.
Bright, Scott
Senator
Bright.
Bright.
Yeah, I ran in, and he goes, "Hey Frank, how you doing?" We got to chatting a little bit, and was able to introduce him to Mike, and he let me know that he's introducing a bill um, for some type of child development and trying to get cheaper childcare or something of that nature. And those are great opportunities to engage and have conversations with representatives. Is is
Mm,
is give testimony, right? Whether on Zoom or whether in person, there's great opportunity in having conversations with them when they know you support other things
yeah.
for the state.
Yep. Very much.
So maybe one of these days we'll have something on giving testimony, a
Yep.
training course on that. But
Well, remember that, God, you remember 2 years ago, you and Mike and I, that
yeah,
whole 20, 30, 28, 30 people, we've seen
yep.
so long ago. My God. Hey, I have a parting. You'd be disappointed if I didn't have a parting funny anecdote for you. I had a birthday recently, and I asked my family to give me new, nice, all cotton t-shirts, but with fun slogans on them. And my two grandsons, supervised by their mother, of course, gave me one that said, it's a blue one with white lettering, and it says, "I would challenge you to a battle of wits, but I see that you are unarmed."
I
I'm
like
going to
it.
wear that down to the Capitol and see how long it takes them to throw me out of the testament at the committee meeting.
How to win friends and influence people.
So Frank, I got a question for you. I
Yes,
know
sir.
last few months back we had a podcast with the Hispanic Americans in Colorado or in Denver. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Hugo.
Was there
Yep.
any was there
Hugo
anything that
Chavez, yeah.
was there anything that came about from that, and or is anybody contacting or touching base with them?
Yeah. We John put together an opportunity where we got together, broke bread, and had a conversation with Nick, the younger young man that's on the
Uh,
podcast. Um, Hugo went to one of Ashley's regional events that she put
okay.
together, you know. So yeah, we're making progress with them, and
Do you know Nick's running for state senate?
Yeah.
The
I did.
the El Paso GOP put him up, have set him up as a candidate. Is it three? It's not three. 11. Exhum's in there. Tony Exhum is the guy in there. And boy, talk about a difference between the candidates. And given what we learned about young Nick at that lunch, man, he's going to run a campaign. He is. I'm looking forward to that.
Good.
Well, we are 4 minutes past 8. Anything else, or are we just going to call it an evening? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody being on here. And if you have any suggestions, any other things that you think we should be training on or discussing, just reach out to me. Let me know. All righty.
I just want to say real quick, Vivian, are you going to be free for the next few minutes? I'll give you a call on telephone.
Yes, good.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
All righty.
Night,
Y'all have a
everyone.
wonderful evening.